My mother-in-law sold my beach house without asking, packed her bags, and thought she'd gotten away with the perfect crime. But when I told her what she'd actually done, her scream could be heard 3 blocks away. Let me take you back to where this whole mess started, because trust me, you need to hear every single detail of how karma came knocking on Linda's door with a sledgehammer and a smile. It was a humid Tuesday morning in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was sitting in my small downtown office reviewing contracts when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Linda. My mother-in-law. The woman who had made it her life's mission to remind me that I wasn't good enough for her precious son, Marcus. I stared at that name for 3 rings before answering, already bracing myself for whatever fresh hell she was about to deliver. Her voice came through the speaker with that particular tone she reserved for announcing her victories over me. Sharp, clipped, dripping with satisfaction. Hello, Jennifer. I'm calling to inform you that we're leaving tomorrow morning. Your beach house has already been sold. The closing happened this afternoon.
Goodbye.
Just like that. No explanation, no apology, just a verbal slap across the face and a dial tone. My hand was shaking as I lowered the phone, but not from fear or sadness. I was shaking because I was trying not to laugh right there in my office. I called her back immediately. She answered on the first ring, probably expecting me to be sobbing or screaming. Instead, I kept my voice steady and said, Linda, that's interesting. But you forgot one thing. There was a pause, and I could practically hear her brain scrambling to figure out what I meant. What are you talking about? She snapped, that confidence already starting to crack around the edges. That's when I let myself laugh, really laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in your belly when justice is about to be served ice cold. The house you just sold, I said slowly, savoring every single word, isn't actually mine. Let me back up and give you the full picture, because this story has layers like a wedding cake, and every single one is more satisfying than the last. If you're enjoying this already, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Just click that red button and join this community. Trust me, you'll want to be here for how this unfolds. Marcus and I met 7 years ago at a real estate investment seminar in Myrtle Beach. He was charming, ambitious, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. We got married within a year, and that's when I truly met Linda. During our engagement, she was all smiles and hugs, talking about how excited she was to have a daughter finally. The mask came off the day after the wedding. Suddenly, nothing I did was right. My cooking was too bland, my career was too demanding, my family wasn't prestigious enough, and my biggest crime of all was that I came from money that I'd earned myself rather than inherited. You see, Linda came from old Southern money, the kind that gets passed down through generations along with crystal punch bowls and casual racism. She'd married Marcus's father, Richard, who came from a similar background, and together they'd coasted on family investments and trust funds while looking down on anyone who actually worked for a living. I, on the other hand, had built my small real estate development company from the ground up, starting with flipping distressed properties and working my way up to small commercial projects. By the time I married Marcus, I was doing well, very well, but Linda made sure I knew that self-made money was somehow less legitimate than inherited wealth. Marcus was caught in the middle, loving his mother, but also genuinely caring for me. He worked in his family's investment firm, a cushy position his father had created for him, and while he was good at his job, he never had to struggle or prove himself the way I had. We had a comfortable life together in our townhouse in Charleston's historic district, and for a while, things were good despite Linda's constant interference. Then came the beach house situation. About 2 years into our marriage, I found an incredible opportunity in Folly Beach, a barrier island just outside Charleston. It was a rundown property right on the ocean, and I mean right on it. The house itself was a disaster, damaged by years of hurricanes and neglect, but the lot was pure gold. Beachfront property with direct ocean access, and the owner was desperate to sell because he couldn't afford the repairs or the property taxes anymore. I negotiated an incredible price, used my own money from my business, and bought it outright under my company name, Coastal Development Solutions, LLC. Here's where it gets important, so pay attention. The property was never in my personal name. It was a business asset purchased by my LLC, which I owned 100%. Marcus wasn't on the deed, wasn't on any of the paperwork, had zero legal claim to it whatsoever. I'd been very careful about keeping my business assets separate from our marital assets, partly because I'd learned that lesson from other entrepreneurs and partly, if I'm being honest, because I never fully trusted Linda not to cause problems down the road. Turns out my instincts were spot on. If you're thinking this story gets even better, you're absolutely right, so make sure you're subscribed to catch all the details. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and clicking that button takes 2 seconds, but means the world to this channel. Do it now, and let's keep going. I spent 6 months renovating that beach house, and I do mean renovating. We're talking complete structural repairs, new roof, new electrical, new plumbing, hurricane-resistant windows, the works. I was on that site almost every day, working with contractors, making decisions, getting my hands dirty. Marcus would visit occasionally, always complaining about the sand and the heat, but mostly he stayed back in Charleston working his 9-to-5 at Daddy's firm. Linda never came to see it even once during construction, but she had plenty of opinions anyway, mostly about how I was wasting money and time on a shack by the sea. When it was finished, though, even Linda had to admit it was stunning. 3 stories of coastal elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean, a wraparound deck, modern kitchen for bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and that million-dollar view that made everything worth it. The property value had tripled from what I'd paid, and I started using it both as a personal vacation spot and as a rental property during peak season. The rental income alone was covering the property taxes and maintenance, with plenty left over. Here's where Linda saw her opportunity. About 6 months after the renovation was complete, she started making comments about how we should let her and Richard use the house more often. Not asking, mind you, just stating it as if it were already decided. Marcus mentioned we could use the beach house next month for our anniversary. We're planning to host some friends at the beach house for the 4th of July. Always phrasing it like Marcus had already agreed, putting him in the awkward position of either contradicting his mother or going along with plans I'd never approved. I tried to be accommodating at first. They could use the house when it wasn't rented. Sure, fine, whatever. But Linda being Linda, that wasn't enough. She wanted a key. She wanted to be able to come and go as she pleased. She started telling her friends that her son owned a beach house, carefully leaving out any mention of me or my role in acquiring and renovating it. In Linda's version of reality, Marcus had bought the property as an investment, and I was just along for the ride. Things escalated about a year ago when Linda decided to redecorate. I'm not talking about bringing a few throw pillows or hanging a picture. I came down to the beach house one weekend to find she'd hired someone to repaint 3 rooms, replace the living room furniture, and install new curtains throughout the entire first floor. She'd spent thousands of dollars, none of it her own, and hadn't asked permission or even mentioned it beforehand. When I confronted her, she actually looked confused that I was upset. I was just making it nicer, she said with this innocent act that fooled absolutely no one. Marcus said it was fine. Except Marcus hadn't said it was fine because she'd never asked him either. That was my first real warning sign that Linda saw this property as hers to control. I had a serious conversation with Marcus that night, explaining that his mother's behavior was crossing major boundaries and that we needed to establish clear rules. He agreed, promised to talk to her, did his usual conflict avoidance routine where he half-heartedly mentioned something to Linda and then reported back that he'd handled it. Spoiler alert, he had not handled it. Your support keeps this channel going, so if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Click that button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. You're going to want to follow this story all the way to the end, I promise you that. The real trouble started 3 months ago when Marcus told me his company was sending him to London for an extended project. 6 months, maybe more, working on setting up a European branch of the family investment firm. Great opportunity, good for his career, except he wanted me to come with him. I couldn't. I had projects in progress, contracts signed, employees depending on me. I couldn't just abandon my business for half a year to follow Marcus across the Atlantic Ocean because Daddy wanted to expand the empire. We argued about it for weeks. Marcus couldn't understand why I wouldn't just take a break from work, and I couldn't understand why he expected me to sacrifice everything I'd built. Linda, of course, got involved, making pointed comments about what a good wife would do and how women in her day understood the importance of supporting their husbands' careers. Never mind that those women in her day didn't have careers of their own because they weren't allowed to have bank accounts without their husband's permission. Eventually, we reached a compromise. Marcus would go to London, I'd stay in Charleston and keep running my business, and we'd visit each other as often as possible. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best solution we could find. He left in late June, and suddenly I had breathing room for the first time in years. No more awkward family dinners where Linda criticized everything from my outfit to my opinions. No more walking on eggshells trying to keep the peace between my husband and my business. Just me, my work, and my beach house for the occasional weekend escape. That's when Linda made her move. With Marcus thousands of miles away and difficult to reach due to time zone differences, she saw her opportunity. She started going to the beach house more frequently, sometimes staying for weeks at a time. I found out because neighbors called me, confused about why there was a woman claiming to own the property and making demands about everything from parking to noise levels. I drove down there one Thursday afternoon and found Linda hosting a full dinner party with 8 of her country club friends, using my dishes, drinking my wine, acting like the queen of the castle. I asked her to leave. She refused, saying Marcus had told her she could stay as long as she wanted. I called Marcus, waking him up at 3 in the morning London time, and he groggily confirmed that yes, he told his mother she could use the house while we were both away. He didn't see the problem. In his mind, the house was just sitting there empty, so why shouldn't his parents use it? I tried to explain that this wasn't about using the house. It was about Linda's pattern of overstepping boundaries and treating my property like her own, but Marcus was tired and jet-lagged and just wanted to go back to sleep. After that call, I knew I had a serious problem. Linda had Marcus's tacit approval, and she was going to use that to do whatever she wanted. Sure enough, over the next few months, she essentially moved into the beach house. She forwarded her mail there, changed her address with her bank, started telling people she had a place at Folly Beach. Richard would come down on weekends, and they'd treat it like their personal vacation home. I should mention something important here, something that's going to matter a lot in a minute. If you're enjoying the storytelling, show some love by subscribing to the channel. We're building something special here, and your subscription helps us create more content like this. Just click the red subscribe button, and let's get to 1,000 together. So here's what I hadn't told Marcus or Linda or anyone really, except my attorney and my accountant. About 4 months before Marcus left for London, I'd been approached by a major development company that wanted to buy my beach house property. Not to live in it or rent it out, but to tear it down and build a luxury resort. They were buying up multiple properties along that stretch of beach and had deep pockets. The offer was substantial, nearly triple what the property was currently worth, but there was a catch. The deal couldn't close for at least 6 months due to some zoning issues and environmental permits they needed to sort out. I'd signed a letter of intent with them, a preliminary agreement that said I'd sell them the property once all their permits were in order. It wasn't a binding contract yet, but it was a serious commitment. The timeline lined up perfectly with Marcus being in London, and I'd planned to tell him about it once everything was finalized. I wasn't trying to hide it from him, exactly, but I also knew that if I mentioned it too early, Linda would somehow find out and make it her mission to interfere. Now, here's where Linda's spectacular ignorance of both real estate and basic legal principles comes into play. She somehow found out about the letter of intent, probably by snooping through my home office when she was over for one of those awful Sunday dinners she insisted on hosting. But she didn't understand what she'd found. She saw a document talking about selling the beach house, saw a big number, and her greedy little brain started working overtime. From what I pieced together later, Linda decided that if the beach house was going to be sold anyway, she and Richard might as well be the ones to profit from it. In her twisted logic, since Marcus was her son, and the property was used by the family, she had some kind of right to it. She also knew, or thought she knew, that Marcus's name was on the deed. He'd mentioned owning a beach house so many times in her presence that she'd simply assumed he was a co-owner. She never checked, never verified, just made assumptions based on what she wanted to be true. Linda found a real estate agent, some sleazy character named Chuck Brennan who worked out of a strip mall office and was known for handling questionable deals. She told Chuck that she had the authority to sell the property on behalf of her son who was overseas, and she even forged some documents to make it look legitimate. I'm talking full criminal fraud here, falsifying Marcus's signature, creating fake power of attorney paperwork, the whole 9 yards. Chuck, being either incredibly stupid or willfully blind to obvious red flags, proceeded with the sale. They found a buyer pretty quickly because beachfront property in that area sells itself. Some couple from Ohio looking for a vacation home didn't ask too many questions, just saw the ocean view and fell in love. Linda negotiated a price that was decent but nowhere near what the development company was offering. She was in such a hurry to close the deal and get the money that she undervalued the property by probably $200,000. The buyers were thrilled. Chuck got his commission. And Linda thought she'd just pulled off the heist of the century. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you're invested in this story, because what happens next is absolutely worth sticking around for. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one matters. Click it now and be part of this community. The closing happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Linda had arranged everything carefully, timing it for when she knew I'd be busy with a project site inspection and Marcus would be asleep in London. She signed all the papers using her forged power of attorney, collected the check, and probably went straight to her bank to deposit it before anyone could stop her. Then she called me with that smug little announcement, so proud of herself, so certain she'd won. That's when I told her she'd forgotten one thing. She'd forgotten to check who actually owned the property. See, Linda had sold a house that didn't belong to Marcus, didn't belong to me personally, and certainly didn't belong to her. She'd sold a property owned by Coastal Development Solutions LLC, a legal entity that she had no authority over whatsoever. Her forged power of attorney was claiming authority from Marcus, who had zero ownership stake in the property. She might as well have tried to sell the Empire State Building or the Golden Gate Bridge. The moment those words sank in, Linda's voice changed completely. The smugness evaporated, replaced by panic. "What do you mean it's not yours?" she stammered. I explained, very slowly and very clearly, that the property was owned by my company, that Marcus had never been on the deed, that she'd just committed multiple felonies including fraud and forgery, and that the sale she'd just closed was completely invalid. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Linda said something I'll never forget, but Marcus always said we, when talking about the house. That was her defense. Because my husband had used plural pronouns in casual conversation, she'd assumed joint ownership and thought that gave her the right to forge documents and sell property that didn't belong to her. The cognitive dissonance was almost beautiful in its absurdity. I told her she had two options. Option 1. Call Chuck Brennan immediately, explain the mistake, return the money to the buyers, and pray they didn't press charges. Option 2. Do nothing and wait for me to contact my attorney, the police, and anyone else who needed to know that a major real estate fraud had just been attempted. I gave her 1 hour to decide. Linda chose option 3, which wasn't actually an option but is very on-brand for her. She called Marcus, woke him up in the middle of the night for the second time in our marriage, and sobbed that I was accusing her of terrible things and trying to ruin her life. She painted herself as the victim, claimed she'd been trying to help by handling the sale of the property, said I was being vindictive and cruel. Marcus, groggy and confused, called me demanding to know what was going on. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything. We're building an amazing community here, and we'd love to have you as part of it. Click that subscribe button, and let's reach 1,000 subscribers together. I explained the entire situation to Marcus. The real ownership structure, Linda's fraud, the forged documents, everything. To his credit, once he was fully awake and understood what had actually happened, he was horrified. He'd known his mother could be difficult and boundary-challenged, but he'd never imagined she'd do something criminal. He immediately called her back and told her to fix it, to return the money, to make it right before this turned into a legal nightmare. Linda, faced with her son's anger and the reality of what she'd done, finally broke down. She admitted everything to Chuck Brennan, who apparently turned white as a sheet when he realized he'd just facilitated a fraudulent property sale. Chuck called the buyers and explained there had been a documentation error and the sale couldn't proceed. The buyers, understandably, were furious. They'd already started making plans for their new beach house, had told family and friends, were planning a 4th of July celebration there. Returning the money wasn't simple because Linda had already spent about $40,000 of it. She'd bought herself a new car, taken a luxury cruise with Richard, purchased some jewelry, and redecorated her living room. When the check had to be returned, she didn't have the full amount anymore. Richard had to liquidate some investments to cover the difference, and let me tell you, he was not happy about it. For the first time in their marriage, Richard was actually angry at Linda. Not just mildly annoyed, but genuinely furious that her impulsive behavior had cost them real money. The buyers decided not to press criminal charges, probably because Chuck convinced them it would be more trouble than it was worth, and they'd get their money back faster if they just let it go. But they did threaten a civil lawsuit if there were any delays in the refund, so Linda and Richard were highly motivated to make them whole immediately. Now, you might think that's where the story ends, with Linda embarrassed and out $40,000 but otherwise unscathed. But remember that letter of intent I mentioned? The development company's permits came through right on schedule, about 2 weeks after Linda's failed scam. The deal closed properly this time, with me signing the paperwork as the actual legal owner of the property, and I walked away with a check that made Linda's fraudulent sale look like pocket change. The best part? I didn't tell Linda or Richard about the development company's sale until after it was done. They found out when they drove by the beach house a month later and saw the demolition crew tearing it down to make way for the resort. Linda called me absolutely hysterical, screaming about how I destroyed a family property. How could I sell it without discussing it with them? How Marcus's inheritance was being stolen. I let her rant for a while before calmly pointing out that it had never been a family property. Marcus had never had any ownership stake, and her opinion on what I did with my business assets was about as relevant as her opinion on the weather. Then I mentioned that if she'd succeeded in her fraudulent sale, she'd have cost me over $500,000 in lost profit from the development deal, and maybe she should be grateful I wasn't pursuing criminal charges. Your subscription means everything to this channel, so if you're enjoying this story, please click that subscribe button right now. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us create more content like this. Don't forget to hit that button before you forget. Marcus came home from London a month early after all this happened. The European project was going fine, but our marriage was not, and he knew we needed to deal with this situation face to face. We spent a week just talking, really talking for the first time in years. He apologized for not taking my concerns about his mother seriously, for not setting boundaries, for assuming I was overreacting when I'd been seeing the warning signs all along. I apologized for not being more direct about the financial and legal structure of my business assets, for keeping him at arm's length when it came to my company, for not trusting him enough to include him in major decisions. We both acknowledged that we'd let his mother come between us, that we'd stopped being a team and started being two individuals trying to manage a difficult situation separately. Linda and Richard, meanwhile, were dealing with the social fallout of the failed sale. Word had gotten around their country club about what had happened, because of course it had. In their social circle, reputation is everything, and Linda's reputation had taken a serious hit. The whispers followed her everywhere. Did you hear she tried to sell property that wasn't hers? Can you imagine forging documents? They say she spent the money before returning it. Poor Richard having to bail her out. Richard, who'd always been somewhat distant from Linda's schemes, started spending a lot more time at his office and a lot less time at home. Their marriage didn't end, but it certainly changed. There was a coldness between them now, a resentment that hadn't been there before. Linda had always been the one in control, making decisions and expecting Richard to go along with them, but now he'd seen the consequences of her impulsiveness, and he wasn't willing to be so passive anymore. As for Marcus and me, we decided to try marriage counseling. Not because of the beach house situation specifically, but because that incident had revealed deeper problems in how we communicated, how we handled conflict, how we dealt with his family. The counseling helped, honestly. We learned to talk about difficult things without either of us shutting down or getting defensive. We established boundaries with his parents that we both agreed to enforce. Linda was not happy about those boundaries. No more dropping by unannounced. No more making plans that involved us without asking first. No more commenting on my career or my financial decisions. No more acting like she had any say in how we ran our marriage or our lives. She tested those boundaries constantly at first, pushing to see if we'd really hold firm, but we did. The most significant boundary was about information. Linda had proven she couldn't be trusted with details about my business or our finances, so she simply didn't get that information anymore. When she'd ask nosy questions about what I was working on or how much something cost, we'd politely decline to share. She hated it, complained to anyone who would listen about how her own son was keeping secrets from her, but we held strong. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're building something amazing here, and we want you to be part of it. Click that red button and help us hit 1,000 subscribers. Your support makes all the difference. About 6 months after the beach house incident, Linda and Richard announced they were buying a condo in Florida. They framed it as a retirement decision, wanting somewhere warm to spend the winters, but everyone knew the real reason. Charleston had become uncomfortable for them. Too many people who knew about Linda's failed scam, too many pitying looks and whispered conversations. A fresh start in a new state where nobody knew the story sounded pretty appealing. I won't lie and say I was sad to see them go. Having Linda living 3 states away instead of 3 neighborhoods away made life significantly easier. Marcus could have a relationship with his parents that didn't require me to be constantly involved, and I could run my business without worrying about what scheme Linda might cook up next. The development company completed their resort about 18 months after purchasing my property. It's beautiful. Actually, a high-end boutique hotel with a spa and restaurant. Exactly the kind of place Linda would have loved to brag about to her friends if she hadn't burned that bridge so spectacularly. Marcus and I went to the grand opening, and I felt this profound sense of satisfaction seeing what that property had become. That beach house had represented so much for me. It was proof that I could take something broken and make it valuable, that my work and vision meant something, that I was capable of building wealth and success on my own terms. Linda had tried to take that from me, not just the property itself, but what it represented. She tried to reduce me to someone who needed to be managed and controlled, whose accomplishments were really just extensions of her son's success. But she'd failed. The property had been mine all along, legally and truly mine, and no amount of forgery or fraud could change that fact. I protected my business assets, stood my ground against someone who'd tried to steamroll me, and come out stronger on the other side. The money from the sale was substantial, sure, but the real victory was proving to myself and everyone else that I couldn't be pushed around. Linda never apologized. Not really. She offered what I call a non-apology apology, one of those "I'm sorry you were upset" statements that doesn't actually take responsibility for anything. She still maintains to this day that she was trying to help, that she didn't understand the legal situation, that everyone overreacted to an honest mistake. The cognitive dissonance required to frame attempted fraud as an honest mistake is truly impressive. Marcus's relationship with his mother has never fully recovered. He still talks to her, still visits when we go down to Florida, still loves her because she's his mom, but there's a wariness there now. He sees her more clearly, understands the patterns of manipulation and control that I'd been pointing out for years. It's not that he loves her less, but he trusts her less, and that changes everything. Before we wrap this up, I want to ask one more time for you to subscribe to this channel. We're working hard to create engaging content and reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Click that button right now and join this amazing community we're building together. As for me, I sold my real estate development company 2 years ago to a larger firm for a price that set me up very comfortably for the future. I could have kept running it, but after years of grinding and building, I was ready for something different. These days, I consult on real estate projects, picking and choosing the ones that interest me, working on my own terms and my own schedule. Marcus eventually left his family's investment firm and started his own venture capital fund, finally stepping out from under his father's shadow. We're still married, still working on our relationship every day, still learning how to be partners in the fullest sense of the word. The Beach House saga taught us both important lessons about communication, boundaries, and what we really valued in our lives. Would I prefer to have learned those lessons without the drama and criminal fraud? Sure. But sometimes the universe teaches you what you need to know in the most chaotic way possible. Linda still lives in Florida, still tells her version of the Beach House story to anyone who'll listen, still believes she was wronged somehow. I don't waste energy being angry at her anymore. She's just a cautionary tale now, a reminder of what happens when entitlement meets ignorance and decides to commit fraud. I hope the new car she bought with that stolen money was worth the embarrassment and the damage to her relationships, but somehow I doubt it. The buyers from Ohio, the couple who almost bought the house before Linda's scam fell apart, ended up finding another property down the coast. I heard through the real estate grapevine that they're very happy there and harbor no ill toward anyone involved in the situation. Chuck Brennan, the sleazy realtor, lost his license for a year due to his role in the fraudulent sale. He's back in business now but has a reputation for being careless at best and crooked at worst. Looking back on the whole situation, the thing that strikes me most is how close Linda came to actually getting away with it. If she'd been just a little bit smarter, if she'd actually checked the ownership documents instead of making assumptions, if she'd approached me directly instead of going behind my back, things could have turned out very differently. But Linda's fatal flaw has always been her certainty that she knows best, that rules don't really apply to her, that she can manipulate situations to get what she wants without consequences. The Beach House situation was just the most dramatic example of a pattern that had been building for years. All the small boundary violations, all the times she'd overstepped and gotten away with it, all the moments when Marcus or Richard or I had backed down instead of confronting her, they'd all led to this moment where she genuinely believed she could forge documents and sell property that didn't belong to her. In her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just taking what should have been hers anyway. That's the thing about people like Linda. They rewrite the narrative in their own minds so thoroughly that they actually believe their own version of events. She wasn't committing fraud. She was helping her son manage his assets. She wasn't stealing. She was claiming what was rightfully theirs. She wasn't destroying trust. She was doing what any mother would do. The mental gymnastics required to maintain that worldview are exhausting just to think about. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it and haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your support means absolutely everything to this channel. Click that subscribe button and be part of our growing community. The aftermath of the Beach House situation rippled through our extended family in ways I didn't fully anticipate. Marcus has two younger sisters, Rachel and Beth, who'd always had complicated relationships with Linda but had mostly avoided direct conflict. When they heard about what happened, both of them reached out to me separately to apologize for not taking my complaints about Linda more seriously over the years. They'd seen the favoritism toward Marcus, the way Linda treated me differently, the constant boundary violations, but they'd written it off as just Linda being Linda. Rachel told me that the Beach House incident had actually given her the courage to set her own boundaries with their mother. Linda had been pressuring Rachel to let her be in the delivery room when Rachel gave birth to her first child, and Rachel had been dreading that conversation. But seeing how Marcus and I had established clear boundaries and stuck to them, Rachel felt empowered to do the same. She told Linda no, she wanted just her husband in the delivery room, and while Linda threw a fit about it, Rachel held firm. Beth had her own Linda issues around her career choices. She'd gone to art school instead of getting a business degree like Marcus, and Linda had never let her forget it. Constant comments about when Beth was going to get a real job, implications that Beth's work as an illustrator wasn't legitimate or valuable, pressure to give up her art and work at Richard's firm. After the Beach House situation, Beth finally told Linda point-blank that her career was none of Linda's business, and she needed to stop the disparaging comments. Linda didn't like it, but Beth had seen that it was possible to stand up to their mother and survive. The whole family dynamic shifted after that incident. Linda had been the matriarch, the one everyone deferred to and tried to keep happy, but now her authority was questioned. Her judgment was doubted. Her version of events wasn't automatically accepted as truth. It was like someone had pulled back a curtain, and everyone could suddenly see the strings and mechanisms that had been manipulating them all along. Richard, in his own quiet way, started making changes too. He'd always let Linda make most of the decisions in their personal life, from where they lived to how they spent their money to what social events they attended. After having to liquidate investments to cover Linda's fraud, he took a much more active role in their finances. He set up accounts that Linda couldn't access without his approval. He started saying no to her expensive impulse purchases. He even told her they needed to downsize the Florida condo because it was more space than they needed and cost too much to maintain. Linda fought all of these changes tooth and nail. She built her identity around being the powerful matriarch, the one in control, the one whose opinions mattered most. Having that power structure dismantled, having her authority questioned and her judgment doubted, was incredibly difficult for her to accept. She went through a period where she barely spoke to any of us, playing the victim and waiting for everyone to apologize and go back to the way things were. But we didn't go back. The family had changed, and while it was uncomfortable and messy for a while, it was ultimately healthier. Relationships based on genuine connection rather than obligation and guilt. Boundaries that were respected. Space for people to make their own choices without constant interference and judgment. I'm not going to pretend everything is perfect now. Linda is still Linda. She still makes comments, still pushes boundaries, still believes deep down that she knows what's best for everyone. But now when she crosses a line, we call it out. We don't let things slide. We don't make excuses or try to keep the peace at all costs. It's exhausting sometimes, but it's honest in a way our relationships never were before. Marcus often says the beach house incident was the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to our marriage. Worst because it exposed serious problems in how we communicated and dealt with his family. Best because it forced us to actually address those problems instead of continuing to paper over them and hope they'd resolve themselves. We're stronger now, more united, more honest with each other about difficult things. As for the beach house itself, or rather the resort that now stands where it once was, I drive by sometimes when I'm in the Folly Beach area. It's strange seeing that luxury resort where my little renovation project used to stand, but it's a good kind of strange. That property represented a chapter of my life that's closed now, and what stands there is a testament to knowing your worth and protecting what's yours. The legal aftermath of Linda's attempted fraud took about a year to fully resolve. While the buyers didn't press criminal charges, there were still consequences. The South Carolina Real Estate Commission investigated Chuck Brennan's role in the transaction, and as I mentioned, he lost his license temporarily. Linda was never formally charged with anything because the buyers just wanted their money back and to move on, and I decided not to push for criminal prosecution. Not out of kindness to Linda, but because the practical reality was that putting my mother-in-law in jail would have destroyed my marriage and accomplished nothing except revenge. That decision wasn't easy, and I talked it through extensively with my attorney. She pointed out that Linda had already faced significant consequences: financial loss, social embarrassment, damaged family relationships, and the knowledge that everyone now saw her clearly for who she was. Criminal charges would have meant lawyer fees, court appearances, media attention, and a permanent record that would follow her forever. As satisfying as that might have been in the moment, it would have created a situation where Marcus would have had to choose between supporting his mother through a criminal trial or supporting his wife who pressed charges. No good outcome there. So I let it go, legally speaking, but I made sure Linda understood that my mercy came with conditions. She was never to interfere in my business again, never to make assumptions about my assets, never to forge anything or claim authority she didn't have. One more stunt like the beach house, and I wouldn't hesitate to involve law enforcement. She agreed, probably because Richard had made it very clear he wouldn't bail her out again. The money from the resort sale, that substantial check I received when the development company closed on the property, went into several different investments and savings vehicles. Some went into retirement accounts, some into a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, some into a real estate investment trust that generates passive income. I also set aside a portion for what I call my freedom fund, money that gives me the option to walk away from anything that doesn't serve me, whether that's a business deal, a toxic relationship, or a situation that compromises my values. That freedom fund is important to me because of what I learned from the beach house situation. Having my own money, my own assets, my own financial security meant I could stand up to Linda without fear. I wasn't dependent on Marcus's income or his family's wealth. I couldn't be controlled through financial pressure. That independence was worth more than any amount of money, and I'm committed to maintaining it. Marcus and I also made some significant changes to how we handle finances as a couple. We keep some accounts joint for household expenses and shared goals, but we also maintain separate accounts for our individual businesses and investments. It's not about mistrust. It's about maintaining the financial independence that protects both of us. We consult each other on major decisions, but neither of us has unilateral control over the other's assets. It's a system that works for us, even though Linda has made pointed comments about how married couples should share everything. Speaking of Linda's opinions, she's developed a new hobby in her Florida retirement, giving unsolicited advice on social media. She discovered Facebook about 2 years ago and has become one of those people who shares inspirational quotes about family and forgiveness while simultaneously posting passive-aggressive comments on her children's posts. Rachel, Beth, and Marcus have all learned to manage their privacy settings very carefully. Linda's favorite passive-aggressive move is posting throwback photos from before Marcus and I got married, with captions about how simple and happy life was back then. She'll share pictures from Marcus's childhood with comments like, "When children respected their parents," or "Before everyone was so sensitive about boundaries." It's transparent and sad, really, this attempt to rewrite history and position herself as the victim of her ungrateful children. The Florida condo situation has provided its own entertainment. Linda and Richard downsized like Richard wanted, but Linda fights him on everything now. She wanted a place right on the beach in an upscale community. He wanted something more modest and affordable. They compromised on a 2-bedroom condo in a decent, but not fancy complex, and Linda complains about it constantly. Not enough space for guests, not prestigious enough for her friends, too far from the country club she wants to join. Richard, to his credit, has stopped caring about Linda's complaints. He's in his early 70s now and seems to have decided that his remaining years are too valuable to spend managing Linda's expectations and smoothing over her social disasters. He plays golf, he reads, he volunteers at a local maritime museum, and he largely ignores Linda's dramatic declarations about being unhappy. It's not that he doesn't love her, but he's finally prioritizing his own peace over her perpetual dissatisfaction. Before I wrap up this story, I want to remind you one more time to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We're working hard to build a community of engaged viewers, and we're so close to that 1,000 subscriber milestone. Click that red button and help us reach our goal. Your subscription takes 2 seconds, but makes a huge difference to this channel. The extended family dynamics have settled into a new normal over the past couple of years. We all get together for major holidays, though the gatherings are smaller and less frequent than they used to be. Linda and Richard usually host Thanksgiving in Florida, and Marcus and I alternate Christmas between Charleston and visiting his sisters. The atmosphere at these gatherings is polite, but not particularly warm. Everyone makes an effort for the sake of family unity, but nobody pretends we're all best friends. Rachel had her baby, a beautiful little girl named Sophie, and watching Linda try to navigate being a grandmother while respecting Rachel's boundaries has been illuminating. Linda desperately wants to be involved, wants to be the doting grandmother, but she keeps bumping up against the limits Rachel has set. No unannounced visits. No posting photos of Sophie online without permission. No undermining Rachel's parenting choices. Linda violates these boundaries regularly and then acts shocked when Rachel enforces consequences like not being invited to visit for a while. Beth got engaged last year to her partner of 5 years, another artist she met at a gallery showing. Linda had opinions about everything from the venue to the dress to the fact that they're having a non-traditional ceremony without religious elements. Beth, empowered by seeing both Rachel and me successfully maintain boundaries, has simply stopped consulting Linda about wedding plans. She shares what she wants to share and ignores Linda's criticism. Linda showed up to the engagement party with a binder full of suggestions that Beth politely accepted and then ignored completely. Marcus has found his stride professionally with his venture capital fund. He's investing in small businesses and startups, using his family connections and financial background to help entrepreneurs get their companies off the ground. It's meaningful work that he's genuinely passionate about, and seeing him excited about his career again has been wonderful. He's also more confident about standing up to his mother now, not aggressively, but firmly. When Linda pushes, he pushes back, and he doesn't apologize for it anymore. As for my consulting work, I'm selective about the projects I take on. I focus on helping other women entrepreneurs navigate the legal and financial aspects of real estate development, particularly protecting their assets and establishing proper business structures. The beach house situation taught me lessons that I'm now passing on to others. I've worked with dozens of women who've thanked me for helping them avoid the kind of vulnerability I experienced when Linda tried to sell property she had no right to. One of my consulting clients actually had a similar situation with her father-in-law who thought he could sell her rental property because his son had mentioned it in conversation. We caught it early, before any documents were signed, and established clear boundaries and legal protections. She sent me a bottle of champagne and a note that said, "You saved me from my own beach house disaster." That made me feel like something good had come from the whole mess with Linda. The development company that bought my beach house property actually reached out to me last year about consulting on another project. They were impressed with the renovation work I'd done on the original property and wanted my input on a similar development they were planning. It felt like coming full circle, getting to use my expertise on the kind of project that had started this whole chain of events. I agreed, and the project turned out beautifully. We transformed 3 dilapidated beachfront properties into a small resort community that preserved the coastal character while providing modern amenities. Linda found out about my consulting work with the development company through some mutual acquaintance and had the audacity to suggest that she should receive some kind of finder's fee since her attempted sale had led to my relationship with them. I actually laughed out loud when Marcus told me she'd said this. The mental gymnastics required to turn "I committed fraud" into "I deserve credit for your success" were truly Olympic level. Marcus shut that down immediately, telling his mother that she had no claim to any aspect of my professional relationships and needed to stop bringing up the beach house situation. That's become the family policy, actually. We don't discuss the beach house incident at gatherings. It's an unspoken rule that everyone follows because the alternative is an immediate explosion of tension and recrimination. Linda occasionally makes oblique references to it, usually framed as, "That time there was a misunderstanding about property," but nobody engages. We just let the comment hang there in awkward silence until someone changes the subject. The Ohio couple who almost bought the property before Linda's fraud collapsed actually became friendly acquaintances of mine in a weird twist. We connected through a mutual friend a year after everything happened, and when they found out I was the Jennifer from the beach house situation, we had a long conversation about what had happened. They were remarkably understanding and even found some humor in the absurdity of it all. They love their actual beach house and harbor no resentment. We've gotten together a few times when they're in town, and it's nice to have turned such a negative situation into at least a neutral connection. Chuck Brennan, the realtor who facilitated the fraudulent sale, never apologized or took real responsibility for his role. When his license was reinstated, he went right back to business as usual, though his reputation never fully recovered. I occasionally see his name on real estate signs around Charleston, and every time I do, I'm reminded that there are people in this world who will prioritize their commission over basic due diligence and ethics. He's a cautionary tale about why you need to work with professionals you trust and verify everything yourself. The demolition of the beach house itself was bittersweet. I went to watch on the day they took it down, standing across the street with my hard hat and my memories. That house represented so much work, so much vision, so many dreams about creating something beautiful from something broken. But I also knew that the resort being built in its place represented growth and progress, both for the community and for me personally. Sometimes you have to tear something down to build something better, in real estate and in life. Marcus came with me that day, stood beside me as the walls came down and the roof caved in. He squeezed my hand and said, "I'm sorry my mother tried to take this from you." It was one of those moments of pure honesty between us, acknowledging the hurt without making excuses or trying to fix it. I squeezed back and said, "She didn't succeed. That's what matters." And it was true. Linda had tried to steal my accomplishment, my financial security, my proof that I was capable and worthy, but she'd failed because I protected myself and my assets. That protection wasn't just legal paperwork and business structures, though those were important. It was also the mental and emotional work of knowing my worth, trusting my instincts, and refusing to be diminished by someone else's insecurity and greed. Linda had spent years trying to make me feel small, trying to reduce my accomplishments, trying to maintain her position as the most important woman in Marcus's life. The beach house was just the culmination of all those small attempts to undermine me. If you've made it this far in the story, I really hope you'll take a moment to subscribe to this channel. We're sharing real stories about real situations, and your subscription helps us continue creating this content. Click that subscribe button and join our community as we work toward 1,000 subscribers. The real estate market in Charleston has exploded since I sold the beach house property. Values have continued to climb, and that stretch of Folly Beach where my property was located is now some of the most expensive real estate in the area. The resort is booked solid most of the year, generating revenue that makes my initial investment look like pocket change. Sometimes I do the math in my head, calculating what the property would be worth now if I'd held on to it. But then I remember that selling when I did allowed me to diversify my investments and step back from the grind of active real estate development. There's always going to be another deal, another property, another opportunity. What matters is making decisions that align with your goals and values at the time, and then not second-guessing yourself to death afterward. I sold because it was the right move for that moment in my life, and everything that's happened since has confirmed that decision. Linda occasionally brings up the beach house in a different context now, talking about the family property that was sold, as if it were some kind of ancestral home rather than a renovation project I'd owned for less than 5 years. She's rewritten the narrative in her mind so thoroughly that I think she actually believes her version of events. In Linda's reality, the beach house was a family asset that I selfishly sold without consulting anyone, and she was just trying to preserve it when she attempted her fraudulent sale. The rest of the family knows the truth, though, and that's what matters. Rachel and Beth both have their own Linda stories now, their own moments of standing up and establishing boundaries, their own experiences with her rewriting history to cast herself as the victim. We've formed a kind of support system, the three of us and Marcus, where we can share stories and validate each other's experiences. It's sad that we need such a system, but it's also comforting to know we're not alone in dealing with Linda's particular brand of manipulation. Richard has become more sympathetic as a figure in all of this. I used to see him as complicit in Linda's behavior, enabling her by never pushing back, but I've come to understand he was also a victim of her controlling nature. He just dealt with it differently than we do, by retreating and disengaging rather than confronting and establishing boundaries. Neither approach is wrong, they're just different coping mechanisms for dealing with someone who refuses to respect limits. The beach house incident also taught me important lessons about marriage and partnership that extend far beyond real estate and fraud. Marcus and I had been living parallel lives for years, coexisting but not truly collaborating. We made assumptions about each other's thoughts and feelings instead of communicating directly. We avoided difficult conversations because we didn't want to rock the boat. We let his mother drive wedges between us because it was easier than presenting a united front. The crisis forced us to either fix those problems or accept that our marriage wasn't going to survive long term. We chose to fix them, and it's been hard work, the kind of work that doesn't get enough credit when people talk about maintaining relationships. It's not dramatic or romantic, it's just showing up day after day and choosing to be honest even when it's uncomfortable, choosing to listen even when you'd rather be right, choosing to put the relationship ahead of being comfortable. Our marriage counselor told us something that stuck with me. You can't control other people's behavior, but you can control how much access they have to your peace. That became our guiding principle for dealing with Linda and with everyone else who tried to create drama or chaos in our lives. We couldn't change Linda, couldn't make her respect boundaries or take responsibility for her actions, but we could limit how much influence she had over our daily lives and our emotional well-being. That principle applies to so much more than just difficult family members. It's about recognizing that you teach people how to treat you by what you accept. Linda had learned over years of marriage to Marcus's father and raising her children that she could push boundaries without consequences. She'd learned that crying or playing the victim would get her what she wanted. She'd learned that if she was persistent enough, people would eventually give in just to make her stop. Unlearning those patterns required everyone in the family to hold firm, to accept that Linda would be upset, to tolerate her tantrums without rewarding them with capitulation. It wasn't easy, and there were times when it felt cruel to maintain boundaries with someone who seemed so genuinely distressed. But we came to understand that Linda's distress was manipulative, not authentic. She wasn't upset because she was being mistreated, she was upset because she wasn't getting her way. The difference matters. You should care about causing genuine harm to people, about violating their rights or hurting them unnecessarily. But you can't make yourself responsible for someone else's emotional manipulation. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they're the one who brought the matches and gasoline. Thank you so much for sticking with this story to the very end. If you found it engaging or relatable, please subscribe to our channel right now. We're working to build a community of viewers who appreciate authentic storytelling, and every subscription brings us closer to our goal of 1,000. Click that button and be part of what we're creating here. Looking back now, for years after Linda tried to sell my beach house, I can see how that incident was a catalyst for positive change, even though it was horrible to live through at the time. Sometimes the worst moments in life force necessary transformations that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Marcus and I might have continued in our pattern of avoidance and parallel living indefinitely if Linda hadn't done something so egregious that we had to confront the underlying problems in our relationship. Rachel might never have established boundaries around her parenting if she hadn't seen Marcus and me do it first. Beth might still be accepting Linda's criticism of her career choices instead of pursuing her art with confidence. Richard might still be passively enabling Linda's behavior instead of taking control of his own life and finances. The whole family system shifted because one person finally said enough and refused to accept unacceptable behavior. I'm not grateful for what Linda did. Let me be clear about that. Attempting to commit fraud isn't some kind of gift just because good things eventually came from dealing with it. But I am grateful for what I learned about myself, about my marriage, about the importance of protecting your assets and your peace. I'm grateful for the relationships that deepened and strengthened as a result of going through that crisis together. The beach house is gone now, replaced by something bigger and more commercial. But the lessons I learned from building it, renovating it, and protecting it from someone who tried to steal it, those lessons remain. They inform how I run my business, how I handle my relationships, how I move through the world. I know my worth now, not in an arrogant way, but in a deep, settled way that can't be shaken by someone else's opinion or actions. Linda will probably never change. She'll probably spend the rest of her life believing she was wronged by ungrateful children who don't appreciate everything she sacrificed for them. She'll continue to play the victim, continue to rewrite history, continue to push boundaries and test limits. But that's her journey, not mine. I've accepted that I can't fix her, can't make her understand, can't force her to see how her behavior affects the people around her. What I can do is continue to protect my peace, maintain my boundaries, and build a life that reflects my values and goals. I can be a resource for other women dealing with similar situations, offering both practical advice about asset protection and emotional support about dealing with difficult family members. I can model healthy relationships for the next generation, showing Rachel's daughter Sophie and any future nieces and nephews what it looks like to respect yourself and others. The resort where my beach house used to stand is called the Tidewater, and it's become a popular destination for weddings and corporate retreats. Sometimes I imagine alternate versions of reality where I kept the property, where Linda's fraud succeeded, where Marcus and I didn't survive the crisis. But those are just mental exercises, not productive uses of energy. The reality is that everything unfolded exactly as it did, and I made the choices I made, and here we are. Marcus and I celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary last month with a quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant in Charleston. We toasted to surviving the hard times, to building something stronger from the rubble, to choosing each other every day despite the challenges. It wasn't a fairy tale romance moment, it was better than that. It was real and earned and honest. Linda sent a card for our anniversary with a note inside that said, "May you continue to find happiness together despite all the obstacles." She couldn't resist that little dig, that implication that she was one of the obstacles we'd had to overcome. Marcus read it, rolled his eyes, and tossed it in the recycling. We didn't let it ruin our evening. That's progress, being able to acknowledge Linda's behavior without letting it steal our joy. The most valuable thing I learned from the entire beach house situation is this: your security doesn't come from other people's approval or from hoping they'll change or from trying to control their behavior. Your security comes from knowing yourself, protecting yourself, and building a life that can't be easily disrupted by someone else's chaos. Linda tried to take something from me, but she couldn't because I'd built foundations that couldn't be shaken by one person's greed and manipulation. That's the story of how my mother-in-law sold my beach house, or tried to anyway. It's a story about fraud and family dysfunction, about real estate and relationships, about standing your ground and knowing your worth. It's not a happy ending in the traditional sense because Linda is still Linda and family gatherings are still awkward and the beach house is gone. But it's a real ending, an honest ending, an ending where the person who tried to take something from me failed because I protected what was mine. If you made it all the way through this story, thank you for investing your time and listening. Please take one final moment to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We're building something special here, sharing real stories about real situations, and we'd love to have you as part of our community as we work toward that 1,000 subscriber goal. Click subscribe, and let's continue this journey together. That's my story. The beach house is gone, transformed into something new. The family is different, changed by the crisis and its aftermath. But I'm still standing, stronger and wiser, with my assets protected and my boundaries firm. Linda learned that she couldn't steamroll me. Marcus learned that he needed to choose sides sometimes, and I learned that the only approval I really need is my own. Not a bad set of lessons, even if they came wrapped in fraud and family drama. She thought she was stealing my dream, but what she actually sold was her last chance at having a relationship with her son.